Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Barenaked Health Podcast. And on the line today, I have Fred Stahlman. Fred, kind of getting going here. Would you mind sharing a little bit with everybody? Some may know who you are, some may not. So if you wouldn't mind kind of giving the rundown, craniosacral, what got you into it, physical therapy, wherever you want to start. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. My name is Fred. Last name is Stahlman. I'm a physical therapist by training. I graduated from Northwestern University a long time ago, specializing in proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. So, after living in Chicago for a couple of years and working in Chicago, I moved back to Pennsylvania, which was my roots, and started working in a hospital-based practice in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, as a physical therapist, and realized I was unemployable pretty quickly. Hold on a second. Sorry.
You good?
Trying to get rid of this phone call. How do I get rid of it?
There. Okay.
All right. Sorry. Not supposed to have phone calls at this hour, I suspect. But
You never know.
anyway, as I was saying, I went to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, worked in a hospital setting. And started studying with other people that were teaching manipulative work because that was the buzzword in the mid to late 70s. Was in the physical therapy world. Everyone was learning manual therapy stuff, joint mobilization. So I studied with being seeking more information, always seemed to be my passion. So I basically took all the classes I could take from Stanley Paris, and when he was still at the Atlanta Back School before he opened up his DPT program at St. Augustine. Took his first certification class in manual therapy, then moved on to Robin McKenzie and did all of his work, and then Freddie Kaltenborn, all of his work, and a few other people along the way. But I was just realizing that as much as I loved what I was doing, it was still a band-aid. It was an outside-in approach, and I was looking for something that was more empowering of the patient. And by then I had left the hospital. I had kind of opened up my own practice with a partner. And we went from a very small part-time practice to a very large full-time 10,000 square foot rehab center over about a 5-year period. But during that journey, I was looking for something else to infuse my educational passion. So I got introduced to the concept of John Upledger. And that was in January of 1986. My God, it's 39 years ago. It's hard to imagine it was that long ago. Doesn't seem like it to me, but when you look at the gray hairs, it certainly does. So I fell in love with craniosacral work as minute as I saw John Upledger come in, and he scrambled my brain very quickly, as possible with light touch. And so taking the skills I had pretty well perfected with manual therapy, observation, anatomical understanding, I was able to put craniosacral to work right away in this large outpatient rehab center that I had helped create with other partners. Became a nightmare. It was my dream, but then it became the nightmare to how to get out of it. And it took a couple of years, but I was finally able to have a quasi amicable separation from my partners. It was not an easy time for any of us at that time. So I stayed in the Mechanicsburg area for a while, and then I ended up moving to Rhode Island, and that's when I joined my soon-to-be wife in practice, Martine Rini, and she was a physical therapist that was doing myofascial release stuff. And so I was doing cranial work, and we had a practice together and renamed it. The combining practice was Interconnections Physical Therapy. So that's where it was born, like in June of 1994. And so even though we were both physical therapists, our passion was still craniosacral work. And so I went on to become certified as an instructor, as did Martine. She ended up teaching Cranial 1 for Upledger for a long time. So we lived and worked in Rhode Island. We traveled all over the country teaching together, internationally as well as locally, throughout the East Coast, Midwest, East Coast, where our primary domain was. Ended up doing an energy healing school together for a 2-year period to look at the esoteric realm, and realized the power of 5 grams of touch is unbeatable. There is no defense for 5 grams of touch done with a therapeutic intention, from a place of neutrality. So that's my journey into the craniosacral world. I was driven, I think actually guided, because I was seeking, always seeking. And so John Upledger was my mentor for everything I did in the craniosacral world, especially in the early days. He was my mentor for all my classes, as was Suzanne Spurlock, Charles Gillum, Judy Sullivan. These are the keystones of the early teaching cadre of Upledger. So they were guiding me along the way, and I was able to take some of the best things that they offered, I think, incorporated into my style. And so my whole focus now when I teach is to try to inspire people to look beyond the obvious, push the boundaries within the realm of possibilities, for teaching Cranial 1 and Cranial 2. That's what I teach at this point. And I'm very happy just teaching those 2 classes.
So this is, I think, a great point for me to interject here, because this is how I got introduced to Fred. Within the last year, I've taken Cranial 1 from him, Cranial 2 from, right? And it was an enlightening experience, I think, to say the least, right? Because we have actually, I mean, very similar backgrounds, right? I mean, same thing. I went to PT school, went heavy into the manual therapy. As far as like, I've taken stuff from St. Augustine as well, right? I mean, like some of the basic teachers, I would say, were even the same. Where we kind of went into that. Where I'm really curious now is to maybe go into a little bit more of really John Upledger. Like, I I've read several of his books at this point. I've tried to actually connect with him through meditation, through trying to just connect with spirits. If you wouldn't mind actually just sharing a little bit about, I guess, how he touched you, like what the true impact was. And I think you kind of alluded to it with, obviously it got you into this work, but there's still something special. There's still, I can't even put my finger to it. Like, what was it about him that really made this so special?
Great question. I'm not sure I know. It was just a knowing. You know, I I liked, what impressed me most was his ability to communicate. He he could do it from a very gentle place most of the time, uh, unless you ask him a stupid question. Then it wasn't always quite so gentle. I think his demeanor, just he opened up possibilities of thinking for me. Uh, I was a pretty structured physical, uh, and with that in mind, I was pretty wound up pretty tight. Even though I like to think I was pretty cool and laid back, well, inside it was not that way. It was just the outside presentation. So, what I saw with John Upledger was the ability to stand in his truth. He didn't care uh, about what people thought. Obviously, he cared, and I think what I saw a person dedicated to enlightening us. I think he was given a gift, and he had the courage to act on that gift. We've all been given insights over our lifetime of things we could have done that might have been amazing transformation, but I don't know about any other people, but I didn't really act on those, except I followed the guidance I got. But here's John Upledger, probably out of the blue, given this concept of cranial osteopathy and then transforming it to craniosacral therapy. I think why this work is so profoundly effective is it goes beyond just structure, it goes beyond just anatomical relationships, even though it's based in the nervous system. It's probably the best modality that I have ever encountered to rebalance the sympathetic parasympathetic harmony and to allow the central nervous system to function on this most operational level. So what I saw in John Upledger was a man dedicated to truth and not being afraid to shake the apple cart, so to speak. He would stand in his truth, didn't care what people thought. And he was an avid reader. He's an avid researcher, a very excellent clinician. To watch him work was almost magical. So gentle and kind, especially with children. When he worked with children, he was just amazing to work with. He could be a tough nut, though, because he was a physician and he was running a big organization. And in the early days, he didn't have a lot of good help, but he brought that on with when he brought John Matthew back into the fold to help his son to help be his CEO and run the company. He came up with a lot of innovative ways of establishing Upledger Institute International as a solid foundational business model. So, and I think what also inspired me about John Upledger is he really had no box. I mean, he always had a foot in science. He was a scientist. And he had the courage to step out of that box, because when he first was introduced to cranial osteopathy, he had no interest in it. It was just too foo-foo for him. It wasn't scientific enough. So, and it took patience, his patience, not clients he was working with, that kind of patient, to enlighten him into the possibility of diving into areas he didn't understand or have any knowledge of. And it took him into acupuncture. It took him into the cranial osteopathy world again because of a surgical intervention he was helping with. And it totally perplexed him, but he had the courage to jump in there and say, I don't know what this is all about, but I'm going to find out. And he became a premier cranial osteopath. Then obviously, as the work evolved, he realized there weren't enough osteopaths that still wanted to do this kind of work, as they were striving for allopathy to become in parity with the MDs for the whole gatekeeper phenomena. And so he was desperate. So he started teaching non-osteopaths how to do this work, started off with teachers and educators and speech therapists. And then he evolved it out to involving all of us. And I think that was the first time I met him. I'm used to showing up in my physical therapy world, the instructors were always dressed to the nines. They had shirt and tie on, not a jacket, but they're always dressed really nice. And here comes John Upledger flowing in, open shirt, hair all over the place, and kind of wild, no socks on. It's typical Florida jaunt coming in. So I just felt really at home. Plus, he, to some degree, reminded me a lot of my dad. But I wanted to make sure, because he was like my dad, I didn't want to be too close. His energy, he's a big energy. And so easily to be overwhelmed by that or get sucked up into the, too many people kind of sucked up into the Papa John or Daddy John motif. And he was never terribly fond of that, to my knowledge. And I didn't want to be a part of that. So, but I liked the ability he could stand in his truth, and he taught from what he knew, and he inspired his students to think out of the box, and he was always so complimentary. If you can feel the cranial rhythm, you can do this. You're better than you think you are. That was his motto. And the fact is, he's always diving into research and became if you look at his books, the first two books are textbooks because he was trying to have an influence in the medical model. Books 3 and 4 and 5 were not. They're stepping out of the box of anatomical necessity into talking with organs, talking with cells, negotiating this whole process of whole body evaluation and arcing and energy systems. All these things that are basically made up terms, but they are based on his willingness to explore what the body is there to teach. And so he would listen and he would follow the guidance of the inner physician. And that was a big transformation for me, and it is for most of us in this craniosacral world. Is most of us go to school to learn how to fix things. Whether it's a muscle strain, a rotator cuff injury, sacroiliac, we're taught how to fix that for the client. Well, he wasn't about fixing anything. He was about helping the body fix itself. That was his mantra over and over again. Treat what you find, not what you expect to find. And never follow a diagnosis. Trust your hands. Trust, inner physician wisdom.
So Fred, yeah, I'm glad you said that, right? Because I've even just for just some of the solo podcasts I've been doing, but even just in preparation for this, been looking online just for some stuff on you, just like anything else that you've put out there, right? Or just about craniosacral in general, right? To see kind of, I want to get an idea of what the internet is saying about it, if you will, right?
Sure.
And it's interesting to see uh, some of the commentary from other physical therapists. And it's one of those, I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
uh, be empathetic to them basically being upset about craniosacral therapy.
Right.
Whereas it was interesting because I think what you're talking about is like mechanical, mechanical, mechanical. Like it has to be mechanical, otherwise it can't exist, or it can't be science if it's not measured in an exact
Correct.
amount of pressure or an exact force or exact angle or whatever that might be. Uh, so I think that's the thing that I love about, like you said, not just the first and second books, but then the other information that he's put out beyond that, then, right?
Oh, excuse
Because
me.
that's, I think that's a big part of the heart of it, right? And I'm curious, how do you respond to some of that, right? Where it's like, this is bullshit. Like, there's no way that's happening, and so on and so forth. Because I'm sure you've gotten it over the last uh, couple of years that you said you've been practicing. So it's like, what does that look like for you now? And also from not just from your standpoint, because again,
Mhm.
you've been in it for a couple decades, but how do you how do you share that with somebody who's been in it, who's getting into it now, like so that they can have a better understanding of, yeah, this isn't just something I think I'm doing. This is something that I'm actually able to do.
Right. It's always been the biggest challenge, especially for those that are locked into the paradigm of evidence-based practice, which to me is kind of a fallacy anyway. Uh, if you look at the quantum physics and quantum mechanics research out there, and you have Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, as soon as you think about a research project or an outcome, you've changed the outcome. So it's all relative, and it's all because of insurance billing. I mean, that's the only purpose for all of that. Uh, you know, the challenge with craniosacral for some people is that it's very experiential. And I have a good friend, Tim Hutton, a craniosacral therapist out of Bellingham, Washington, who teaches Cranial 1, SCR 1, and he also teaches immune response classes. Uh, but he has a PhD in physics. And so he's very clear that says it is almost impossible to describe a subjective experience with objective language because it's unique to every individual. Now, every second of the day, I'm different. My frequencies are different every day. Every time I start on the feet, by the time I get to the head, I might have a different frequency I'm running. Every client is different every day. Every second, they're changing and changing. So I think what Dr. John clearly drilled into my head is that his results mattered. If you're making a difference in the client's presentation, helping to empower them into the ability to be in charge of their own body, their choices, their energy levels, then that's a victory. And it may look different for different people. Some people been living with a pain pattern for decades, and all they want to do is have a little relief. Other people have had pain for a few days, and they want to be totally free, and they're freaking out by it. So it's just, excuse me for a second.
Yeah.
So I think it's the hardest thing. You can't convince anybody against their will. And Dr. John was always very clear. If this is not meant to be for you, you won't stay in the work. You won't stay. You won't keep going. So it takes a unique person to be drawn to this work. In our classes, the vast majority of the students in our classes are massage therapists.
Sure.
If I have 10 to 15%, maybe 20% of PTs or OTs in my classes, that's a lot. When I go north, I see more PTs in my classes than when I stay in the south. I'm not exactly sure why, other than some of them have been hit with the Zen stick that says it has to be evidence-based, and this is too energetic. Well, everything is energetic. Everything, that's the irony. When you start thinking about your patients for tomorrow, you're already basically treating them because they're changing. As soon as you energetically connect, energy follows thought. So it's such a superfluous, silly argument. You treat your patient the best you can. You do the best, whatever tools you have, and hopefully they'll get better. My tools now used to be PT stuff. They used to be all the modalities that I grew up with in the PT world. I
Which
don't
are
have
also frequencies.
I don't know any of the new stuff. I don't know how even have a concept of dry needling or any of that stuff, and I have no interest in it. My tools are my hands. So my primary tool is always craniosacral. I use an awful lot of visceral manipulation work. I use a lot of esoteric, a little bit of esoteric, lymphatic drainage, and certainly occasionally I pull out my PNF if I need it, but not too often anymore. So I think it's, I think you just have to you can't convince people, but you give them the opportunity to think out of the box a little bit. Give it a try. What do you got to lose?
So, Fred, when you say that you bring in the esoteric, what does that entail as well?
Well, I had the opportunity to do a 2-year energy healing school.
And if you could even expand on that a little bit, I'd love to hear about maybe what that looked like and then build into kind of how you've put it into
Sure.
practice even.
This was a school that was run by a fellow at that point. His name was Robert Jaffe. Robert Jaffe was a MD, ophthalmologist. He had been a follower of Osho Rajneesh, and due to complications in that ashram, it kind of collapsed. And
Yeah.
so he realized he had clairvoyant skills, and he thought he would start teaching an energy school. The whole premise was it's called the School of Energy Mastery. It does not exist as such anymore. And the whole message was you don't need a guru to go to God. Direct vertical streaming. You don't need a middle person. So we decided to go, mainly because my wife decided she wanted to do this. I wasn't going to let her do that without me. We weren't married at the time. We were living together, but I didn't want to risk the fact that she'd go off somewhere else. So I was jumping in a little bit, not out of excitement and curiosity, but out of fear. So here we go. So we show up in Sedona. We took a class in Omega in upstate New York, a weekend workshop. We really liked what he was doing, liked his presentation. Ended up signing up for his school. It was a 2-year school. You'd meet for 17 days, 5 times over a 2-year period. And it was intense. We show up like, two boneheaded PTs. One of us probably more boneheaded than the other. That would be me. Uh, so anyway, we show up in Sedona, and we drive up to Sedona, and it was this big circus tent, this massive circus tent, on top of a plateau. So we go up, and we had booked hotels or whatever rooms for the 2 weeks we are going to be there, 17 days. And it was like the class was, you start in the morning about 6 in the morning with what was called dynamic meditation, which was a very physically moving, jumping, screaming, move energy type of meditation. It wasn't a quiet, peaceful one. And then we do that for about an hour, go back to your residence, shower, have breakfast, come back probably by 9 o'clock and start the day. And you're there probably from 9 to 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, processing, learning, processing. Jaffe would be teaching energetic principles of chakras, reading energy fields. The treatment technique that they used was called awareness release technique, which is almost identical to SER, which is what we found it quite fascinating. Not a lot of physical hand contact. You're holding the field as opposed to the physical body. And instead of calling on an inner physician like we might do in craniosacral work, we're calling on a higher power. So it's a vertical streaming to higher consciousness. Other than that, it's all the same. So when we first started, there was like 117 students in this class. Intense processing work for 17 days. And enjoyed Sedona when we had off time. Got to love Sedona. Interesting. Most of the people in that class were Osho devotees. They had been, and also were upset that Osho was no longer around to lead the Enlightenment, and they wanted enlightenment now. They paid their money. They wanted the Zen stick of enlightenment now. So
got him his Rolls Royce.
Yeah, for the 2 years that we were there, it was like a third chakra power play the whole time, fighting. It's like playground stuff sometimes, energetic playground.
Yeah.
But it was a lot. We met some wonderful, wonderful people. The instructors that were helping Jaffe were all Barbara Brennan graduates, men and women, physicians. We had a radiologist who was a clairvoyant radiologist. Think of an oxymoron that is. But Wayne was a gun-toting guy from New Mexico. Then he moved to Wyoming. So anyway, there was a good group of people. A couple of them became kind of like grandparents to us. We were obviously a little bit younger. That was in 94, so that was a few years ago. 94, 95. So we've made some really good friends in Santa Fe along the way. So our classes went from Sedona, we did 5 classes, 3 times in Sedona, once in Estes Park, and once in Snowmass. Because he was trying to get away from the pink Jeeps and all the yuppies coming to Sedona, as well as probably the myofascial release on the rocks. I think he was trying to escape from the energy of all that.
Sure.
But anyway, love Sedona. It was a great, I think after a couple classes, Jaffe changed his name to Ibrahim and realized he was in trouble. So he went back to a guru program. He made it a Sufi program, and he followed the teachings of a guy named a guru named Siddhi. And I think he moved his practice, his whole school, to somewhere in California. I think they bought a golf course that had gone bankrupt or something like that. I think they do some stuff in Fort Lauderdale still. I'm not sure. I've kind of lost track of them. Once they've converted away from the you don't need a guru to go to God, I was not interested. So that was our But it was something that finally cracked my cosmic egg. I'd been through all the cranial classes, 2 advanced trainings, all these with John, and I still was carrying a package of stuff that I didn't know how to get rid of. I didn't even know it was there. I touched some of it, obviously, but not the core wounding. The energy school helped me break that open. So that was probably the biggest transformation. Plus, I got to the point where Martine decided she would marry me once I was able to dump a lot of my stuff. So anyway, that was a wonderful time in my life. It's also a very challenging time, but it all worked out for the greater good. But I use that now just in really feeling energy fields. I'm a hands-on guy, so I find that you can't compete with 5 grams of touch. I mean, you can do esoteric work, and we all know you can do distance healing work. That's how a lot of people survive COVID, or they do it as a traditional thing. That teachers classes, I think Ken Coles does stuff like that all through the Upledger umbrella. Uh, they always say that please don't call it craniosacral therapy if you do distance healing, though. That's all. So just call it distance healing, because John Upledger gave his life so we could be doing this hands-on manual therapy modality called craniosacral therapy. And if you throw too much esoterica into it, and you lose the foundations of the nervous system principles. So that's why he just call it whatever you want, just call it craniosacral. But with the advent of Zoom platform, what a great modality to be doing distance treatment. So I used to do a lot. I haven't done any for a long time, but I used in my energy healing school days, part of our homework assignment was doing a lot of distance healing work. So I've done that. It's kind of interesting. You never know what's going to happen. Of course, you don't know what's going to happen in treatments now, but it's different when you have your hands on someone, when you can feel the texture of the tissue change. When it's a distance thing, you can't always tell. You just have to trust. So,
Fred, what I'm curious then too, uh, Fred, what are you the best in the world at?
what
So
am I?
yeah, and I'm gonna put this in the context where it's in. I say it's like, okay, we talk of you talked of Robert Jeffrey there, like he had the clairvoyance, like he was able to see things like that. With Upledger, it's that being able to take his hands, like turn it into that, the just truly like the imaginative realm, like taking what he thought and just making it reality. Like he was able to do that with things, right? And what do you truly excel at? Like, what do you see? Like, is like no, no, and this could be both in the
Mhm.
craniosacral SCR realm. This could be kind of wherever you want to take that. But like, what is it that you're just like really like exceptional at?
Staying out of trouble.
Are you sure about that one, Fred? Come on.
Well, better than I used to be. Let me put it that way. Uh,
Okay.
I don't know what I'm really good at. I think I've evolved out of necessity.
Sure.
Uh, Challenges in my life have led me to make choices. Sometimes the choices were made because I didn't have a choice, but even that is a choice.
Certainly.
But your choices, I've had several that were limited. Uh, so I think I'm really good at following my instincts, my inner knowing. Uh, Very first opportunity I had to do that when I graduated from college. I got drafted. I graduated from college in 1969, height of the Vietnam War, and I was heading to Vietnam. There was no doubt I was either going to be a medic because I had a biology pre-med background, or I was going to be a second lieutenant being a college graduate. So both of those had life expectancies of about 2 weeks if going to Vietnam in 69, 70. So I said, no, I don't think so. So I enlisted, right, somehow finagled a graduate deferment out. So I went to Penn State for a year with working on my master's in genetics. And then in January of 70, the draft board said, we made a mistake. We can't give you this deferment anymore. You can report next week for active duty. I said, no, I don't think so. So I looked around real quick and I found pharmacy technician looked safe to me. So if I was going to Vietnam, because I wasn't politically savvy enough to think about leaving the country or doing draft evasion or anything like that, I was just a sports driven kid. I mean, that's what I love to do. I was excellent at every sport I've ever played. Um, but I just knew I had to do something different. So I said, if I'm going to Vietnam, at least I'll be in the back. I won't be in the front line. As mixing pills, counting salves, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to be somewhat safer than frontline material. So I ended up going to Fort Dix, New Jersey. It took me a while to get over hating all. I used to hate sand. Now I live in sand here down in Florida. But June in New Jersey, rolling in sweaty sand is not a fun place, and dodging bullets. So anyway, then I went to Fort Sam Houston for my training, Medical Field Service School, Fort Sam Houston. Well, I went through that, then they needed instructors. So I was in the right place at the right time. So I got chosen to be an instructor. And so that means the Army would put me through their teaching program. So I was enlisted. About three of my classmates also went through the program. We were in there with captains and majors and colonels and you name it. We were the only grunts in the group. So, but I ended up for the next 2.5 years, I taught anatomy and physiology at Fort Sam Houston. And not knowing what to do when I was getting out, I actually thought about re-enlisting for a few minutes. But having nothing else to do near the end of my tour of duty, because there was no classes to teach, not very many anyway. The people beside my office were physical therapists. And I'd go pick their brain. What do you do? They said, we're physical therapists. I said, what's that? I had no clue. We work with sports medicine stuff. We help athletes. I said, oh, I can do that. That's right up my alley. I said, okay, how do I do that? So they were both graduates of Northwestern. So they helped me do my applications. I got accepted into Northwestern. And why I wanted Northwestern was at that point, this was before the DPT stuff, before MS, master's therapy. They had, if you didn't have a BS degree, if you already had a BS degree in a related field and had met all the criteria, you could take what's called a certificate program, 16 months. So I packed up my car, had a little trailer pulling a car. I had two cars, drove to Chicago. Never been to Chicago in my life. What a interesting exploration that was. It was one safe to be in Chicago. It was a fun place. Went to Northwestern. The school was down in the Miracle Mile, right on the loop in the old dental school before they built the new rehab institute. So I think back to your original question, I think following my guidance, in spite of not knowing the outcome. The other thing I think I'm really good at is inspiring people through teaching. I love to see light bulbs go off. I love to push boundaries, comfortable boundaries. I like to do this energetic ear pull, to think out of the box a little bit more. Look at the whole concept of frequency medicine, frequency dynamics. And so I love that. I love hands-on work, but I think, and the other thing I think what I really excel at is just being a good person. I've worked hard on that. I do my best. We all make mistakes. We all do stupid stuff. But I think I've really dedicated. I'm an avid reader. Actually, I'm an avid listener now. I listen to books on Audible because I can have a lot of books on my phone and don't have to carry them around. So, following Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, amazing Buddhist principles which I think applies so much to craniosacral work because it teaches presence and mindfulness. and impermanence, and letting go of the expectancy of outcome, and just being able to be the conscious listener. David Hawkins' work on vibrational frequency, and then just all the other amazing people that have opened up worlds of consciousness. Paul Selig has been a huge influence on me especially the last 10, over the last 10, 15 years. I think I got introduced to him early 2000s, somewhere under middle 2000s, maybe. Probably middle 2000s, 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in that ballpark. But he's been a major influence. So I think it's just questing to learn, be open to new ideas, new thoughts, and just learning how to be present. I think that's some of the gifts I think I've developed over the years.
Fred, I'm curious about maybe going into like the holding frequency, right? Like, how would you maybe describe what being able to do that is when somebody's in the room with you, like, oh, they're on the treatment table, like for newer practitioners who necessarily don't know what that means or what that feels like, how do you describe that to them?
Well, I guess I would have to come into the basic concepts that every cell, every tissue, every cell of your body has a frequency, and every cell, every tissue is different. And a lot of it just goes back to the readings. David Hawkins' work. I go back to Fritz Smith. I mean, Fritz Smith was an amazing gentleman. He developed and taught zero balancing, but his whole method of teaching was about how the spine is a skeleton. The spine is an antenna for energy transmission through the crown, through your feet, and you have access to unlimited frequencies. They're all coming through and around you. So it's just a matter of looking at David Hawkins' work and looking at the principles of frequency dynamics. I think that's what really got me thinking more and more about that. And I just started. For me personally, I just have learned how to raise my frequency, and I do it. I have no idea where it goes. I set a number. I don't know if I'm there or not. Who knows? Who cares? But it's higher than my patients. And so when I'm introducing this concept to patients, I talk to them I never talk down to anyone, but I don't talk from a snooty place. I said, everyone has a frequency understanding. And hopefully I've introduced the concept of inner wisdom, inner physician. I don't like the word inner physician so much. I love inner wisdom better. Dr. John used inner physician because it was a safe term that he chose, because inner is all about not having outside influences on your choices. And physicians at one time were held in high esteem. And they should be, but they're still humans, and sometimes they make foibles like we all do. So anyway, to get away from that. Now, my dad was a physician. He was a great physician. Did everything with his hands. He was a palpator. He could die. He didn't have MRIs and CAT scans. That was back in Western Pennsylvania before the advent of all the new technology. It was back in the 50s and 60s, maybe 70s a little bit. But anyway, he didn't have that.
Fred, I must interject, even saying like new technology, his technology might have still been better, even though there's more new technology out here.
He was known for that. He had great bedside manner. So, but I also know that there's always a double-edged sword with physicians. They're good people, but they have an edge. And my dad had an edge. Sometimes he gave at the office. When he got home, he wasn't always as tired and not feeling so good, grumpy. When you're a kid, it's always misperceived anyway. But, to me, the physician name can be a little caustic. I don't like to see any physician put up on a platform or pedestal. So that's probably my biases coming in. So I much rather prefer the term inner wisdom, because it's all about the inner physician. So they talk about the inner physician knows exactly how to fix yourself, and they know what frequency you need. So I don't even ask them to know what they need. I said, just ask, what frequency do you need to clear this strain pattern for your highest good? And if they ask me, what do I mean? Then obviously I have to give a little education on frequency dynamics. But, and I think David Hawkins' Power versus Force is a critical piece of literature I think should be required for anyone in the healing arts. Because it looks at, you let to see your patients. And if you know that 85% of all your patients coming in are under a frequency of 200, which is neutral, that means you're living in fear or anger or rage or depression or guilt or shame. And because of any type of body work that you're involved with has energetic transference. And this is what kind of makes me kind of crazy. People are worried about energy or frequency, yet it's inherent in the nature of the work we all do. I mean, there's always transference. This is why you go to work feeling great and you leave after the end of the day or end of the week and you feel lousy, because you've traded, the patients, you've given them your energy because you're open and sensitive and you're trying to do this work. And there's been a trade. They give you money, but if for that money, credit card, insurance card, whatever they're giving you, they're going to take your good energy, which you gave them freely, because this is what we want people to walk out looking good and smelling good out of your office. And then we don't. So, and that's what burnout happens. This is why people get burned out from heavy duty practices or practices where they're working 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, years and years and years. There's nothing to refresh the vibrational frequency or the juice. So I just really work on teaching people the power of raising frequency. And I just tell them, pick 500, pick love. Love is 500 on Hawkins' scale. Now, whether his scale is accurate or not, he swore by it. And I'm not.
If you're focusing on love, I don't think you're going to go wrong either way.
Well, that was one of Dr. Upledger's major, he had many quotes, but he said, if you're putting your hands on your client with the intention of helping them heal, love should accompany those hands. So he was talking this back in the 70s, not calling it frequency. He was just calling it connecting from a place of heart-centered love for chakras. So sometimes I have to educate a little bit. And that's why even in Cranial 2, even though we talk about in Cranial 1, we have these lectures called Direction of Energy. I've obviously modified. I don't think there are many other instructors doing that, but that's okay. To me, it's not about energy. Frequency is a better term. People handle that word better, especially if you're talking to people with religious preferences. Sometimes the word energy can be very a negative concept. So hard to argue frequency. So even in Cranial 2, I revisit that lecture, because if you weren't in my Cranial 1 class, I'd like to have you rethink how you offer this energetic connection. And one of the biggest challenges with body workers of any kind is this whole issue of transference. If you're not energy conscious, you will take stuff on and you'll wonder why I don't feel good. How many studies have we seen over the decades of medical students getting the same illnesses as their patients because they allowed themselves to take it on? And this comes with even this whole concept of ancestral trauma. And we're looking at passing down a belief system from generation to generation. If you believe that belief system, you believe that energetic frequency, you'll take it on. So it's the power of raising your frequency with consciousness, to me, is the ultimate healthcare provider thing. If you can do that, everything else we do is just adding polish to the apple, so to speak. I mean, if you can teach people how to do that, I think frequency medicine is going to be the healing modalities of the future, and not, we're going back to Star Trek or Star Wars where you had the scanners and the med beds where you jump in and they just kind of scan you and treat you. Probably going to happen. Maybe not in my lifetime, maybe in yours. Uh, who knows? It's coming. Um, so I don't know. So in the meantime, we just talk frequency and use our hands. Works beautifully.
Fred, how do you think you can both offer that energy but also not lose your own? Like, is that possible, or do you think just by putting the hands on, you're automatically going to lose some? Maybe, like you said, shouldn't be enough to drain you, but always going to be some amount.
I think that's part of becoming energetically conscious, because the energy I'm offering to my client is not mine. I'm the conduit. I'm an antenna. So it's not mine. If I get caught up giving my energy, I get depleted like everybody else. So having been there, done that way too many times in my early part of my career when I was learning how to, didn't have this concept of thinking energy. I was just thinking, or frequency. I was just thinking energy. And I got as depleted as we all have, either as a PT or even doing my cranial stuff in my early part of my career. So right now it's just conscious awareness. If you raise your frequency and you offer, I make it very clear this is not my frequency. I'm offering what you tell me you need. They may, I know that the patient has no clue what they need. They may not even know the concept. I said, every tissue has a frequency. Can you ask your inner wisdom, what frequency do you need to clear the strain pattern? And they don't, that's all they have to do. They don't have, I don't know what frequency they need. I just offer whatever frequency the inner physician or inner wisdom is calling for. I trust that they do it because they get better. People, the changes happen so quickly. And it's not because of me, that's for sure. I'm holding contact. That's about all I'm doing.
So then, Fred, what are your, I mean, having done like some of the energy healing school, right? Obviously reading quite a bit, like what is your current self-care practice? Like, what do you do to uh, bolster that energy, vitality for yourself, and just keep that going?
Well, I get treated regularly. I've got a great craniosacral therapist, actually two of them that I trade with. So one does cranial work and one does, I don't have any idea what she does. But she does chiropractic, cranial, who knows what she does. I mean, she has so many degrees behind her head. I have no idea what all that is. But we trade a lot, usually once or twice a month. I listen to books all the time. Sometimes they're spiritually awakening books. Sometimes they're tier one operator stuff. I have to appease my alter ego sometimes. The wannabe Fred. Yeah, that's an action hero kind of guy. But so I like books like that. But I love listening to Thich Nhat Hanh. I love David Hawkins, Paul Selig, just people, Oliver Sacks on consciousness. I'm looking at just books that help me think. Uh, I love music. I used to be an avid runner. I retired marathoner, but I can't. I had a knee injury 5 years ago or so, and had to have some outpatient surgery. So I don't run as well. I had tibial plateau fracture, so I can't run like I used to, but I can. I do power walking, uh, and I'm in a wonderful relationship at the moment. So all that is helping rekindle my spirit. And teaching fires me up. I mean, I get inspired by teaching. Working day to day, seeing patients is wonderful, but it can be draining. Just the fact of having to do it. Whereas I can teach for 4 days, and I usually don't get exhausted teaching, and I can go to work on Monday. Uh, some people, that's a strain for them, and that's okay. But I like to do that. So teaching is, to me, very uplifting and energetically fulfilling.
I think I wouldn't mind like teaching or talking about three of those things, right? Where you said, I think I want to highlight the importance of right, like getting work done to yourself. And this is just to me very much a practice what you preach mentality, right? Across healthcare practitioners across the board, mental health, physical health, whatever it is, right? Like need to take care of yourself. And what does that entail? Like some of that is that. And I think then too, right? You said relationships. One relationship, five, like whoever those relationships are in your life that give you that power, that support, like those are incredible. And then
Mm.
almost sounds like the last thing is just like it's finding that passion too, right? Where it's like you are truly just so passionate about this work that being able to not just share it one on one, but 20 people at a time, 30 people at a time, like is even more empowering and just brings that vitality through to you.
It does. I agree. So,
Yeah, that's I love hearing that because it's okay. Should everybody go for more walks? Like you said, like getting out walking, running. Yeah, I think people could do a lot more of that.
mhm,
But people know that, right? It's like
mhm.
it's some of those other things that you mentioned there that are just I just think so overlooked as far as um just practices that people need to take on. And that's part of the reason that I love with Upledger classes is like part of the requirements for future classes is you have to document when you're not only doing the work, but getting it done to you. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think that happens anywhere else that I've taken classes from. So I'm certainly impressed by something like that.
Right. That is smart.
Fred, one of the things that I heard you talk about, actually on something that I listened to, I think it might have been with the Upledger, and this is something that I'm pretty big on, is you talked about EMFs, right? So electromagnetic frequencies. And if you wouldn't mind touching on the importance of that on the treatment table, in the treatment room, like why is this such a big deal for both you as a practitioner, but anybody else on the table in the room?
Well, the EMFs are kind of a buzzword right now. Everyone's just with the onset of 5G networks everywhere. Um, and some people are extremely sensitive to that. And I think you have to be aware that there are things such as EMF toxicity, uh, impacts cells, impacts the frequency of cells. Um, I have numerous clients right now that are extremely sensitive to EMF. And so when they come into my room, I've got to turn everything off. And I always like to have music playing because that regulates the frequency of the room a little bit. And a couple of them can't even have that on because it just everything has to be off. And they sometimes have EMF devices that they lay on or put on their wrist to modulate. Um, for me, I I don't think I've ever been sensitive to that. Now I don't know if it's just because I raise my frequency and I don't worry about it. Uh, the problem is sometimes when you think too much about something, you manifest it. So, you know, we've all heard of this foolishness called the law of attraction. Well, sometimes you do attract to you what you think about. And if you're living in victim or you're living in trauma, you're not going to ever escape EMS around this country, around the world. Maybe if you go to upstate, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you might have a no tower, but anyway, if you're living in population-based cities, you're going to have EMS. So how do you get over that? I just try to remove the fear from it. I do run a Schumann resonance in my room. I just got to. I'm experimenting with them. They have the Schumann device. One is the very basic one runs at the 7.83 Earth frequency, which is for grounding and centering and inner peace. Then the V2 Pro has, you can set your own frequencies and they give you a list of what they're for. So I kind of look at what my patients are coming in for, if it's emotional stability, physical pain, whatever, and I try to set the frequency for that, or maybe it's what I need that day. Uh,
Ask
Abundance.
your inner wisdom, ask their inner wisdom.
That's right. So I use that. I'm new to that. For the most part, I just teach people how to raise frequency. If you raise your frequency, EMS won't bother you, in my belief system. But if it's not theirs, it doesn't matter. So if it's not their belief system and they really think that they're impacted or they can't escape it, then you just have to give them strategies. Hook them up into places where they can get devices for blocking EMF. That just makes me think of all the people buying electric cars. Do you know you're sitting on this massive battery right under your butt? That's going, I can't imagine when, sitting on a battery like that, driving anywhere for any length of time. So
I
that's
now
that.
remember, yeah, listening to people talking about that 10 years ago on some podcasts where even then, like, I mean, Mercola was all over it when some of that
Right.
stuff first started coming out, like very much against it. And at the time, I didn't, I mean, I don't think I had the understanding. I was like, oh, I mean, that makes sense, but not
Yeah.
more beyond that. And now it's like, oh, oh yeah,
I'm the same.
that's a big battery. Yeah.
I'm the same way. I heard about it. I just didn't know it wasn't current, so it wasn't something I was going to worry about. I said, well, wait, see what happens, and here we are. Uh, so anyway, if people love electric cars, that's great. Just know, with every choice you make, there are consequences. And so you have to own the consequences. You're riding in a car that is a massive EMF machine, even though every car is pretty much, but not to the degree of an electric battery. Um, then heaven forbid if you have to ever replace that battery. This is like $10,000 to replace a battery. That's nuts. So that shouldn't trade your car in rather than put a new battery in. So anyway, EMS are a problem for a lot of people. And so I never diminish it. I never talk down to them. I don't poo-poo it. I say, okay, what can we do to help you to be able to mitigate the EMS? So I just try to work with conscious education. So
Is there anything else that you see on the horizon then? So it's like health, wellness in general, or you're talking like frequency medicine. Do you see that? Yeah, and you could go down that rabbit hole if there's anything else that you see like on the horizon of like this is going to be kind of an up and coming thing, and or is it more the craniosacral the somato emotional release, and is like is that where you see that I'll call it frequency medicine going?
I think so. I think eventually, I think craniosacral will fit into the mainstream model better. Um, the biggest problem for a lot of people is it's probably not covered by a lot of insurances, which creates a problem for those of us in the practitioner side, because you can't negotiate with no cash or no income. Um, so I see all the hands-on modalities. I think are moving to frequency dynamics. Um, I think craniosacral is just purged for that. Uh, Obviously, more and more people looking at trauma treatments, how to treat people in trauma. We obviously know the issue with polyvagal theory and all the people talking about how to treat trauma, whether it's Peter Levine or Bessel van der Kolk or any of those people really talking about that. Well, I think craniosacral and SCR is probably primarily deal with that. Uh, because we're working with the body's wisdom, touching the body tissue, listening to the tissue response when a question is asked or whenever a nonverbal question is asked, or just listening to the body when you're getting a tissue release and listening to how the patient responds to that. So I think our world is moving into frequency dynamics. I think it's going to be, I think drugs will be out the window at some point, not in my lifetime, but I think that we will be having frequency medication, frequency doses. And I think when you realize your hands are the most powerful frequency modulating tools we've got, uh, the frequency coming out of our hands is pretty equivalent to the healing frequencies needed for tissue release for fascia. So it seems, anyway. Some, no, but I think it's coming. I think craniosacral is, as long as we stay true to our roots and stay true to the process of what craniosacral is all about, I truly believe it's a divinely inspired modality. I think that's why it's so profoundly effective. I think it deals with frequency dynamics. I think it deals with the inner wisdom knowing how to fix itself and getting away from the fix-it model. Because those of us who are played the fix-it game, you're never done. You'll never, until you solve the belief system that's creating the problem, it'll always be back. And so that's the journey. No matter what modality you use in body work, whether it's craniosacral or PNF or manual therapy or manipulation or modalities out the wazoo, until the client asks you the magic question. And that magic question is, I love this work. I love coming in. It feels wonderful. But my symptoms always seem to come back after a while. Why is that? So that's when you just look at them and you smile and you say, are you just asking or do you really want to know? If they're just asking, they don't want to know. But if they really want to know, that opens up the doorway for me and hopefully our colleagues like us to discuss the possibility of belief systems. And belief systems are what drive your behavior, because that's all limbic system. And here comes my friend Bruce Lipton with his, biology belief book. You manifest what you think about, and the environment controls activating or deactivating genes. But he also wrote this book called The Honeymoon Effect, which is all about a child up to the age of 5 is being programmed by their environment. Everything they see, everything they hear, everything they perceive is being stored in the limbic system. They may not have language for it, but they're learning how to survive in their personal environment. So they learn how to parent at 5 by watching their parents. They watch what they watch on TV. What they may not understand it, but the words are coming in, stored in a limbic system. And that is the system that drives behavior for 95% of what you do every day, is limbic system. 5 to 10% neocortex. But so the limbic system is the driver, and that's all belief system. And that's why I think children at this age develop personalities to survive with. Some become pleasers, some become class clowns, some became super athletes, some become villains and victims and chameleons, whatever we need to be. Some are poos and tigers and rabbits and eeyores. So they become what they need to be to survive. If they can't do that, they don't survive. But I think the power of the consciousness of the child, not the toddler, but the soul essence of the child, makes that decision early on. And that's what drives all of us until we ask the question, why? That opens up the door. Now, every clients may want to know why, but they may not be willing to do what it takes to solve the why, because that requires a belief system change, or a change in work environment, change in diet, change in partners, change in worldview. And not everyone's willing to do. That's their personal choice, but at least if it's brought to the forefront, they can make the decision. Let's go for it, or let's stay stuck where we are. But that's empowerment. That's, to me, the essence of craniosacral work is empowerment. Not everyone, almost everyone benefits. Of the thousands of people I've probably seen in 39 years, I think almost everyone has had some benefit to some degree. Some won't recognize it because they're into the no pain, no gain philosophy, or I'm not their ticket. Maybe I push their buttons by talking goofy to them. Who knows? But I think the world is moving into vibrational frequency as a primary healing modality. I think we're getting that way. Even medicine may be frequency modulated. as we go. So maybe they'll develop cancer drugs that carry a certain frequency that it can address that particular frequency of the cancer. So I think that's what it's going to take.
So is that frequency what let me go back a step. Where we're talking generational traumas, right? So again, generational trauma is something that's happened, generational trauma, something that's happened one generation, 10 generations. I mean, I've heard people cite research, generational trauma can go back 21 generations, right? Whether it's true or not, I have no reason to believe otherwise, right? If it's a frequency that's been carried on, what what is it about? Is that the craniosacral work? Is that the vibration? Like, how are we dealing with these traumas, whether they be physical, emotional, whether they be childhood traumas from the age of 5? Like, it's a very kind of broad thing. I'm just curious, Fred, of where does where do we go to really start working on these traumas?
Well, I think your treatment table or mine would be a good place to start. Uh, it's awareness. It's you some I think we all have generational trauma, but we also have generational health and vitality. So we tend to forget that, but we also have that potential. So I think generational trauma, if it's there, I think it can't change unless you identify it. If you can identify it, then you have a chance to do something with it. If it stays buried in the limbic system, nothing ever changes. And this is, more of Bruce Lipton's concepts. I was trying to think where that thought just kind of buzzed out of my head for a second. So, and I think this is, you look at Bruce Lipton's work on inherited diseases. He has found in his research that most of those are actually learned behavior patterns because it's been passed on through belief systems. My great grandmother had breast cancer. My mother had breast cancer. I will get breast cancer. That's already, that seed is imprinted on that.
I think sometimes almost even more common than that is arthritis.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's one that drives me crazy. Oh, my parents had arthritis. Of course, yeah, I'm just gonna, everybody gets it, right?
Oh sure. We all do. You're human.
But it's just the hearing of that one just day in and day out.
Yeah, fibromyalgia is another. Any of the chronic things. We all have something. We're humans. We function. We live. Unless you live in a bubble, we all have life. The other thing is someone always tells me, well, my doctor says I have a bulging disc or a herniated disc. Well, if I have a herniated disc, they should be in the operating room, number one. We all have bulging discs. If you're over 18, you have a bulging disc. So that doesn't mean it's caused. Anyway, my son's bugging me. That's what he thinks I'm dying or something. Anyway, I am. We're all. So anyway, I think when a topic comes up, I think so. That's all we can do. It's a reality. There is such things as ancestral trauma, and it's a belief system. So if you can, then they have a chance to escape this pattern that seems like it's a genetic inheritance when it's just family predisposition by belief system. So, and that's it's a touchy subject of how to handle that.
Any advice for people on how to handle that?
just with integrity. So when I ask you about it, you have, I think, learning about frequency, learning about learn about belief systems. Obviously, if you're in the craniosacral world, that's part of our curriculum as you go through all of this. But not everyone spends a lot of time talking about belief systems. We talk about inner physician, inner wisdom, but what drives that inner physician, inner wisdom is the belief system that is the foundation of what. Hold on just a second.
Sure.
All right, got it. So hopefully it doesn't screw you up too much. So I think it just takes, if we as therapists are comfortable in our own skin and we can talk about those kind of things, then we can be a good conduit for educating our patients. So otherwise, if you don't know what you're talking about, you come off a little pedantic and like a know-it-all. So if you can gently have a consciousness around belief systems, ancestral trauma, and how to help someone through that, no, maybe you're not going to be able to change it. Maybe the cancer's already implanted. So then you help do the best you can with lifestyle and choices and help them build their immune system, or whatever else you can do. As therapists, we're somewhat limited of what we can really do without the cooperation of the inner physician, of the client. So I don't let the personality of the patient get in my way, though. I've learned how to listen patiently with what they're telling me, but I understand what they're telling me is probably a belief system. It's someone's belief system. Maybe it's the physician's belief system. They have a collection of symptoms. The patient wants an answer. Please tell me what's wrong with me. So whether we run a battery of tests to find out or not, we say, you have fibromyalgia, you have arthritis, you have something that, and that the patient walks out of the office with a script saying, I have arthritis, and they're happy in their dysfunction. So anyway, I think it's just a matter of education of ourselves, of our clients, being respectful. Don't push the river. Don't act like you know everything. And be willing to tell people you don't know. I'm really good at that. If I don't know the answer, I can make one up, but I'll tell them, here's my best impression of what's going on. I won't necessarily say this is exactly what's happening. So as a therapist, I think we just have to learn how to dance that dance of blending and melding with our client energetically, physically, and through interaction.
Fred, where are you? Has your teaching style changed, I guess, is what I'm curious. And or is there things that you're doing differently even 5 years ago to now? And or do you see like anything that you want to teach about changing? Whether that's specifically with the craniosacral, whether that is more like going into the belief systems, whatever that might be.
I think it's changed dramatically from 5 years ago. Only because of, everyone that is an instructor is teaching through their filters. So my filters have expanded quite a bit lately into the realm of frequency and consciousness. So my mission when I teach is to help people understand the power of their choices, the power of their inner wisdom. Obviously, when I teach a Cranial 1 class, I try to be a little bit more reserved in how outside the box I'm going to push them. There's a lot to learn in Craniosacral 1, changing how you palpate, perceiving rhythms that are so sensitive that it doesn't fit into the box that we had before, whatever your discipline was. So, but even there, I try to start pushing frequency dynamic concepts. So I've totally rewritten my pressure, my direction of energy lecture to make it a frequency modulator with references with Paul Selig and David Hawkins and Oshman and Valerie Hunt and the people that talk about vibrational frequency as medicine and how to use it therapeutically. So with that class, I try to stick more to basic concepts of craniosacral with a little bit of push into the frequency range when I talk direction of energy lecture. Now in Cranio 2, it's a whole different game. You've had several months of practicing. You're already a professional at something in your life. And by then, if you're into Cranio 2, you're pretty well, you appreciate the power of the system of craniosacral and the Upledger Institute. So I have a chance to push a little bit more to expand our belief systems a little, what's possible. So I figured out how to teach more in less time. I've become more efficient. I have found out on day 1 and day 2 of my craniosacral class, most people can't see the demonstrations, so I don't do them. But I air demonstrate, and I have every student in the class demonstrate the technique in the air. So the reprogramming limbic system, this is part of like Joe Dispenza's neural reprogramming. And then when they get to the table, whoever's on the table stays there for several different techniques. And I walk them through every one. So it's a personal directive training, as opposed to just letting people go on their own. Let us know how you're doing. If you have trouble, raise your hand. We'll come by the table. Well, I try to avoid that. I try to walk them through everything. And the TA, the teaching assistants are around to be able to handle the confusion that still might be present because I said something that confused them. And I do tend to push the energy concept, the frequency modulation concept a little bit more. My whole body evaluation, everything is teaching and put it in less time. But I've learned how to manage the teaching application better. So I think that's probably it. I don't teach anything terribly well. I have my own style of teaching. I love storytelling, so I teach a lot through storytelling. Most of them are true. Maybe a while for a point to get a laugh, because I think about raising frequency all the time. I set the energy of the classroom high before I start with my screenshot. It's an I am presence thing. It's 1,000 frequency, radiates the room, and it's always in my background of my iPad. So it's always playing. So that tends to raise the frequency of the students in the class without them even knowing about it. And at some point, I'm going to tell them. So I guess I'm more consciously verbally interactive on that realm of energy dynamics and frequency. I give people a lot of space to play. I'm not a dogmatic type of person, as you know. I'm pretty laissez-faire. I want people to do what is the right. I want them to know the techniques. I want them to know what they're doing, but I also want them to use their own filters of how they perceive it. Everyone perceives things differently, and just because I feel it this way doesn't mean you will. So I think I've learned to accommodate variations in styles better, and I try to give people permission to be themselves. That's the thing I've learned how to do over that, and teach more effectively. And I love questions. Questions to me that's what enriches the class, because questions let you open doors that wouldn't have opened otherwise. And so I love questions as long as they're germane to what we're talking about. relatively speaking. Being a Pisces, I love to tell stories. I can ramble pretty well. So, but I only do that when I'm teaching. It's not my normal personality style. I don't do that anywhere else. I'm a pretty reserved, quiet, introspective person most of the time, but you never know that when I'm teaching. It's like an actor on a stage.
Yeah.
So I can play a role that isn't, it's part of who I am, but it's not who I live day to day.
Well, Fred, what's actually
I
most
wish I
interesting,
could, but
well, I think what's most interesting to me about that is also that you said like after a 4 day teaching class, you're almost more energized than when you went into it sometimes. Uh,
sometimes I am.
that's
It depends on the energy of the class.
certainly,
If I've got
certainly.
a good class, and I have been very blessed with great teaching assistants over the decades. I don't think I've ever had. There are some that are a little bit more opinionated. There's some that have a little bit more OCD tendencies. But with all of that, they're all excellent. They're doing their best. So I lost the thought.
TAs doing their best.
Yeah. That's probably a senior moment. Maybe it's a Pisces moment. I'm not sure which. So I don't know. What was your question again?
Well, actually, I had actually even a little bit more of a follow up on that. Um, but do you think, or feel, or however you want to go about this, Dr. Upledger's been passed a few years now, right? Um, how much of an impact is he still having? And I guess what I mean by that, okay, several of the instructors have, I mean, spent several decades learning from him, with him. Uh, Other instructors that would be up and coming are not necessarily, didn't have like that direct contact.
Right.
Um, how do you think that's going to affect maybe just craniosacral work overall?
Well, the biggest challenge with any discipline is when the founder of the discipline is gone. It usually takes a few decades for it to diminish into something else, losing the original. I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. Those of us that have been around a while have worked really hard at maintaining the integrity of John Upledger's teaching. New research out there is pushing boundaries a little bit because we're looking at whole new ways of describing the cranial rhythm. Where's the generation of the rhythm? Dr. Upledger thought it was the pressure stat model, which was regulated. The production, circulation, drainage of the fluid drove the rhythm, controlled by the nervous system. Well, what some of the most recent research out there is saying, no, that doesn't seem to be the case. What is the case is there seems to be a neurologic model where there are oscillating neurons that are driving the fluid through the system. So actually it's a nervous system driving it, not the fluid driving the rhythm. It's the rhythm driving the fluid. And if there are oscillating neurons in the brainstem at 6 cycles a minute, there are oscillating neurons in the arterial walls that operate at 6 cycles a minute, and also in the fascia. So, I think it's evolving into hopefully better. Dr. John was always one to allow growth and change with the times. I'm hoping we don't lose the foundational principles of Dr. John's teaching through new instructors with new ideas, different filters, not knowing the core intent of the original teaching. And I think that concerns me, but I can't, it's above my pay grade. So, people like myself, probably Chaz Perry, Marianne Cisco, Rebecca Flowers, Stan Jerome, some of the remaining old school people, because to have vitality, the organization needs new people, new instructors, and they're coming, but they also come with different filters, and they don't have the personal connection other than watching John on videos or streaming or somewhere. They don't hear him yelling in your ear to lighten up, or trust what you feel, don't treat what trust your hands, trust what you feel, don't treat symptoms. They don't hear that. I hear it every day in my head. I hear him on my shoulder yelling at me. So I worry about that. But I also trust the integrity of evolution, that our work will evolve to only bigger and better. And I just have to get out of the way of my own little petty fears, wanting to hold on to things that were near and dear to me, but not to someone else. But yet, you know, I'm still teaching. I'm going to be teaching probably as long as I can. Obviously, I'm at an age where a lot of people have retired. No way, I wouldn't know what to do if I retired. If I have a couple of days and I don't have a patient, I go bonkers. What am I going to do? I can only play so many games of golf on my computer. If I'm not seeing patients, I can't afford to play golf in Florida, so I don't do that. So you can only walk so many miles. You can only read so many books. So I love what I do. It's not work; it's a passion. And I'm going to teach as long as I can function. I don't screw up too badly, and the senior moments don't take over the Pisces moments. Um, so, but I trust that the people coming up will be nuanced by the people that have been around a while. And my some concern is there's a strong emphasis. Europe is a very vibrant market. And most of the students in those classes are osteopaths. The European osteopath is like the Canadian osteopath. They're manual therapists. They're not MDs or DOs. Not like the American. They're the
Right.
original Sutherland DO.
That
Manual therapy.
I didn't know that. I knew of like the Canadian model, but I didn't know as much of the
Exactly the same. But they're
Okay.
coming out with a Sutherland background already.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole different teaching level of credentialing you're talking to.
Okay.
And there's a push. So, and I think Upledger is doing their best to keep up with that, to stay on top of the game with research, to be able to appease the Sutherland people with the Upledger thoughts of craniosacral work. So, and the power of that. So, they're under a lot of pressure. It's a competitive market worldwide. I think they have done a phenomenal job. I think the three leaders that have been running this organization and the board of directors and the curriculum committees, I think, have done an admirable job. I don't agree with everything, but that's just because I'm who I am, and I'm old school when it comes to certain things, and that is one. So, but I trust that the people that are in charge are going to carry out to the best of their ability, and the system will just get better and better.
See, and partly why I asked that question, Fred, is I've reached out to you, obviously you, but also a couple of the other people that you mentioned there, because I want to get an even better understanding of who John Epledger
Mm-hmm.
is. I mean, just that model, because I, as I said, I've actually connected with him in meditation, like
Mm-hmm.
sat a lot, and I think both by doing that, but also uh, trying to connect to those that physically were
Right.
present with him is really a big part of my
Yeah,
practice.
I had a lot of interaction with. Sure, I had a lot of interaction with Dr. John, but not day to day. I'd come
Right.
in and get out. So people that you might want to talk to, certainly Chaz would be one if he's willing to talk.
Yeah.
Stan Jerome would be good.
And I took SCR with Stan, so I reached out to him too. Yeah.
Yeah. And another person who's on the outside edge right now is Don Ash. Don Ash is a PT out of New Hampshire. He was one of Dr. John's right-hand men for a long time. He
Okay.
taught Cranial One for us for years and years. When Dr. John died, he decided it was time for him to spin off and do his own thing.
Hmm.
And he developed what's called the Craniosacral Alliance, which he teaches classes. He gives homage to the Upledger model and to Dr. John, but he has his own flair on things.
Cool.
So Don's a good guy. He probably would have, he might be another avenue to look at the inside baseball of John Upledger. Stan, and obviously would be one. Chaz would be one. Avedon had a lot of experience, I do believe. Rebecca Flowers. But some are available, some are not. So, but anyway, just names, old schooly names. Suzanne Scurlock, perhaps, because she was with him quite a bit during the training sessions.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's obviously I'm newer to the work and to it. I've heard about it for at least a decade now, but really as far as like my practice of it, but it's to me there's still is sometimes that connection with the I'll say the originator of things that just it's still different, right? Like there's
Yeah.
I don't want to lose that model, and that's why I like taking some of the classes as well as with people that worked either, like you said, day to day, or came in, worked with him for a while and got out, like just that back and forth. Um,
Mhm.
but also, like you said, you've been doing it a bit of time, and I think learning from hey, what you've done over the past few decades, like you said, it's not even just the decades; it's the last 5 years. Even just your work that
Mhm.
it's still craniosacral work, but there are many different avenues that can have as long as you're getting those 5 grams of touch still in there too.
Right. Right. And the benefit of different instructors will all teach the same concept a little bit differently. Um, so that's just the beauty of the work, and what Dr. John always gave people permission to teach the core intent of the tech. That's all. But as long as we stay true to the model, I think we're going to be okay.
Fred, I think this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough just for all you've had to share here. Is there anything else that you would either like to touch on and or kind of just sharing? Hey, if anybody's interested in working with you, where can they find you, learn more about you?
Sure, I'm always open to people calling or emailing me. I don't return phone call. I return phone calls. I don't answer my phone, but I do texting well or email well. So um, if they want to call me about questions, I'd be glad to answer anything within reason if I can. If I can't, I'll send them somewhere where they can get the answers. But I'm always open to that.
Perfect, perfect. And like you said, it's interconnections is your practice, correct?
Yeah, it's Interconnections Physical Therapy. It's a small one-person practice. It's always been small, but it used to be two people. But now my wife died in 2009. So since then, it's just been me, whether it's been in Naples or Fort Myers, or now it was in Palm Beach Gardens at the Institute, and now it's in Jupiter. So, but I'm always available for sessions. I'm available for consultations, for questions. It's what I do, is I live and breathe this work. So what better way to do it than answer questions or share information? In the meantime, I'm heading to Madison, Wisconsin, the end of August. I'll be there with Stan Jerome. He'll be teaching an SCR2 class, I think. So that could be trouble. But anyway, anytime he and I get
Sounds
together,
fantastic.
we'll hash out all the nuances of the world and all the things we want to help change Upledger into. So that's
Well, Fred, I cannot thank you enough. I encourage listeners, hey, check Fred out, like especially if you're down in the Jupiter area there. Hit him up for a session. If you're local to him, make sure you start seeing this guy. Fred, thank you again so much.
You're welcome, buddy. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you and have enjoyed having you in classes. I love your inspiration and your focus and your dedication to truth.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fred.
All right, bud. See you well. Thanks, Nick.
Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.